Okay, today we're in section 1.5, adding integers. Adding integers. All right, what is an integer? We learned that on Friday. What's an integer? Yeah, it's basically a whole number. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. -1, -2, 3, 4, 5 can be both positive and negative. All right, well, there's some rules that you need to know for this lesson also. We need to know what an additive inverse is. That is a fancy word for the opposite. It just means the opposite. All right, you need to have a refresher also on your rules for adding and subtracting integers. This is something that you learned in 7th grade math if you were here at Trinity. Possibly you learned it at a different school as well, but these are the rules that we're going to go by in the next few sections. Same sign, add and keep. Different sign, subtract and take. What do I mean by subtract? I mean subtract the absolute values and take the sign of the greater absolute value. So it's important that you understand absolute value. Opposites always equal 0. We'll talk more about that in a second. And then lastly, every number has a sign, and that sign is in front of the number. So we're going to work in this lesson to eliminate double signs. You even see them in your homework assignments over the next several sections. But the problem with double signs is in the rest of your textbook, for the rest of the year, you are not going to see double signs. So you need to be able to recognize the actual sign value of that number when it has a double sign in front of it. So we'll talk more about that in a second, but I'm not even going to teach you, plus and negative and how we work on that. We're immediately going to start eliminating those double signs. So let's explain some of these in more detail. The additive inverse is the opposite of any number. So simply put, all right, I'm just basically putting a fancy definition to a term that we already know. The additive inverse of 15 is -15. It's just the opposite sign. So what if I asked you, what is the additive inverse of -8? You just say 8. What is the additive inverse of -7?
7.
You just say 7. All right, so additive inverse means opposite. So when I'm adding and subtracting integers, and we're going to see more examples of these rules in the next couple of examples, but you just need to have them written down for now. Same sign, add and keep, different sign, subtract and take. All right, so what is this rule about opposites? Any number in its additive inverse will always equal 0. Well, let's take the number -4. What is the additive inverse of -4? 4. So take a number and its additive inverse, and your answer is always 0. Any number. So what's the additive inverse of -10? 10. Well, guess what? -10 plus 10 is 0. Any number and its additive inverse is 0. So if that was maybe a true-false statement on a quiz or a test, you would know what the answer would be. And every number has a sign. The sign is in front of the number. Sometimes we get subtraction signs confused with negative signs, but we know that they're the same thing. If I'm subtracting something, I'm also taking it away. That's negative. All right, so they are actually the same thing. We just need to recognize that I treat it like a negative number with my rules. Any questions on the vocab? So in example 1, I'm immediately going to, the first thing I want to do is I want to recognize that there's a double sign. What does a double sign mean? It means that there are two signs in front of one term, back to back. So that's why -28 is in parentheses. You should be writing this expression down. -54 plus parentheses -28. So since there are two signs in front of the plus -28, I want to eliminate that. And here's my rule. My rule says if the sign is plus a negative, It's the same thing as just subtracting it. Plus a negative is the same thing as just a negative by itself. So I'm going to rewrite the expression negative 54 minus 28. Negative 54 minus 28. Now I look at the expression and I ask myself, do these terms have the same sign as each other, or are they different signs? Well, they are the same. 54 is negative and 28 is negative. Well, you say, well, that's a subtraction sign in front of 28. You're right, it is. But that also means that it's negative because you're taking away. You see that? So since they are the same sign, my rule says to add their absolute values and keep the common sign, or keep the negative. So 54 plus 28 is what?
Negative 82.
It's 82. And yes, I keep the negative because they were both negative. All right, so there's a couple steps here. I want to eliminate my double sign, and then I need to ask myself, are they same sign or different? In this case, same sign, add and keep. All right, so let's look at B. If I wanted to eliminate my double sign, which I want to do right away, I would write negative 7, and then plus a negative is equal to what? Just a negative 6. So now I have to ask myself, same sign or different? What do you think? Same sign. Since they're same sign, what am I going to do? Add and keep. Add and keep. 7 plus 6 is what?
13.
And I keep my negative. Negative 13. You can think about it this way too. If I spent $7 in Old Navy and $6 in Hollister, how much money did I spend? $13. When I spend money, it doesn't put money back in my account. It takes more money out, right? I go further into the negative. Do you see the connection there? Spend some money, spend some more money. I spent that amount combined, right? So that's where that concept or that rule comes from. I want you to try to rewrite the expression C without the double sign. So just like we did A and B, I want you to now rewrite it without the double sign. All right, what'd you write? Just minus 5. Just minus 5, okay? The plus and negative just changes to a negative. Now, are these same sign or different?
Same.
They're same, so what's my answer?
15.
Negative 15. Raise your hand if you got negative 15. All right, now let's do D. 5 plus 16. This is not a trick question, okay? Are they same sign or different?
Same.
They're both positive. So 5 plus 16, I add and keep. I keep my positive. So I treat that the same way. If I did my chores and I earned $5 for one chore and $16 for another chore, how much money did I earn in my allowance? $21. Anybody in here get an allowance? Y'all get allowances? Okay. I used to get an allowance. All right, what about E? I want you to rewrite that expression now without the double sign and then try to solve. Raise your hand when you have your answer. All right, so I rewrite it how? Y'all tell me. Negative 3 minus 12. And what's your answer?
Negative 15.
Very good, negative 15. All right, any questions on solving these expressions when they have the same sign? Any questions? All right, so now let's look at if they have different signs. So now I still, on some of these, have the problem of I've got a double sign in front of one of the terms, so I need to eliminate my double sign. 8 plus negative 15 would be the same thing as what? 8 minus 15. But now what you see is that 8 is positive and 15 is negative. 8 is positive and 15 is negative. So since they are now different signs, one is positive, one is negative, I need to follow my rule to subtract their absolute value. So I'm not worried about signs. What is 15 minus 8? No, it's just 7. And now I have to figure out, is my answer positive 7 or negative 7? And my rule says I take the sign of the greater absolute value. Since 15 is negative, my answer is also negative. Now you can think of it this way too. If you subtract 8 from 8, what do you get? 0. So if you subtract 15 from 8, your answer is going to be negative. Does that make sense? Okay, so you can think of it logically that way also. Now look at B, negative 23 plus 24. Same sign or different? They're different. So my rule says to subtract them. What's 24 minus 23?
1.
Is my answer positive or negative? Why? Because 24 is bigger. 24 minus 23, I'm not quite to 0 yet, let alone in the negative. Try to solve C. Again, I can recognize that they are different signs. 15 is negative, 8 is positive, so I add them, I subtract them, and take, so I subtract. Why is my answer negative 7, not positive 7? Very good, because 15 is the larger absolute value and it's negative. All right, go ahead and solve D, E, and F, following the same rules, okay? So these are all different signs, so I need to subtract and take. All right, so negative 13 plus 6 is, what guys?
Negative 7.
Negative 7, very good. I subtract and take, 13 was bigger. What about E? It's going to be positive 5 because 25 is bigger and it's positive. What about negative 14 plus 9? Negative 5 because 14 was bigger and it's negative. So we subtract terms that are different signs. All right, now what if I'm adding more than 2 integers? Well, I want you to write this hint down. Group your common signs together and we can rearrange them because of the commutative property. The commutative property says that I can rearrange terms in an expression as long as I keep the sign in front of each original term. Group common signs together. What does that mean?
Like 71 and 15.
Like if they're negatives, group your negatives. If they're positives, group your positives. Well, the first thing I need to do is get rid of my double sign, a plus and negative. Plus and negative is the same thing as just subtracting it, right? So 71 minus 14 plus 15. So which ones could I group? 71, negative 14, positive 15. Which ones can I group together?
71 and 15.
71 and 15. 71 plus 15 minus 14. This just makes it a little easier. Could I work it left to right? Absolutely, I could. Okay, but it does make it easier if I group my positives and negatives. Maybe not specifically for this one, but when I have multiple negatives grouped together and I can add and keep, that is helpful. All right, so 71 plus 15 gives me 86, and 86 minus 14 gives me 72. Now, if I haven't already told you, just remember, you cannot use calculators on these sections. If you use your calculators, you're not actually practicing your rules for integers. So that's good and bad for your test. On your test, that means that the actual expressions are not going to be difficult to solve. That just means that I'm going to be looking to see if you can use your rules for adding and subtracting, multiplying and dividing integers. All right, now let's look at the second one. What do I do first? I need to get rid of these double signs. Get rid of my double signs. Plus and negative is the same thing as subtracting it. So negative 16 plus 20 minus 10 minus 8. So now here I clearly have a lot of what? The majority of this expression is negative. So I can group my negatives together. I can maybe pop my positive out front and then go negative 16 minus 10 minus 8. All right, you could have put 20 in the back, either way. But what can you combine? You need to combine your common signs. So what can you combine together? What can you add and keep? Janie?
16, 10, and 8.
Very good. 16, 10, and 8. Does it matter what order you combine them? No. So which two numbers would be pretty easy to combine together? 10 and 8 or 10 and 16. So 16 and 10 make 26. Then what's 26 plus 8? You might have to jot it off to the side. That's no big deal. 34. 26 plus 4, that's easy. 30, 4 left over, so we're at 34 now. So 20 minus 34. Go ahead and subtract them. What are you going to get? You sure negative?
No.
Yeah.
Yes.
Why negative?
Because 34 is greater.
34 is bigger. Very good. 34 is bigger. It's definitely negative 14. 34 is bigger. All right. So we don't need to actually talk about getting rid of double signs because we've been doing it all lesson. We're going to move over the power or the checkpoint because we've already done a lot of practices. Now, up until this point, especially if you had me for math last year, we learned all that last year. But now we're going to take it one more step, one more example, and we're going to make an algebraic application here. What does that mean? That means that I'm going to take these values, x equals negative 22 and y equals negative 12. I'm going to substitute them into the expression, and I'm going to solve. Okay, so I take a value, plug it in for a variable, and I solve. What was my value for x?
22.
Negative 22 plus negative 9, but I know that plus and negative is the same thing as what? Subtracting. So now I ask myself, same sign or different?
Same.
What do you think?
Same.
They're the same. They're both negative. So what do? I add. But wait, I see subtraction signs. Why did you say to add? Because they're both negative. Add their absolute values. Keep your negative. All right, so that's a really common misunderstanding. They say, well, why are you adding? All I see is a subtraction sign. But remember, if you spend $22 and you spend $9 more, did you spend more money or less money?
More.
You spent more money. You have to add them together and keep your negative. Negative 22 minus 9 is negative 31. Your bank account is $31 less, okay? Not more. I wish it worked that way, right? The more money you spend, the more money you have. I wish it worked that way. Fortunately, it does not. So now let's do the next one. We make our substitutions. Negative 22 plus 17 plus negative 12. Well, why did I write it that way? Because in the original expression, there's already a positive, and I had to plug in my negative value for 12. But I know as I'm writing that turns into a what?
A subtraction.
Turn into a subtraction sign. I don't care if you just go ahead and write it as subtraction to save you a step. So when you're doing this homework assignment, if you want to go ahead and just write it as a subtraction sign from your original problem, you can do that. Does that make sense? That just saves you a step. I just want you recognizing plus and negative is the same thing as just subtracting. All right, so I subtract it. All right, wait, I thought negative 12 came last. Why did I rearrange it? Because I'm going to group my common signs together. Go ahead and solve this one. For your answer.
Negative 17.
Very good. Negative 17. Negative 17. All right, so now let's look at the third one. Y minus 18 plus x. y minus 18 plus x. Go ahead and make your substitutions. So I substitute in for y, negative 12, minus 18, plus negative 22, but I know that's what? Subtraction. So if you went ahead and just wrote that, that's fine. And they're all negative. So I just add and keep them all. Negative 52. Okay, so if you understand that, that should be everything you need to know for 1.5.